What are the 5 biggest myths regarding October 12th, Hispanic Heritage Day? Myth number 1. October 12th commemorates a genocide. America was not discovered. It was invaded and looted. There's nothing to celebrate. October 12th is not meant to celebrate any genocide, nor any conquest. This day marks the anniversary when the Caravels spotted land after a month of crossing from the Canary Islands to the Antilles. On that day, they had zero contact with the natives. And of course, Hispanic American heritage is the result of everything that followed. Either way, the theory claiming that the Spanish Empire carried out an indigenous genocide is impossible, and this theory is even discarded by historians who are disdainful toward Hispanist ideology. It was completely impossible for a few Spaniards to murder millions of indigenous people, even more impossible given they had no reason to do so. Even the most loyal followers of Bartolomé de las Casas admit that the millions of indigenous murders he wrote about are completely exaggerated, and they contradict. The Spaniards were so incapable of murdering millions of indigenous people that without the help of thousands of indigenous allies, the conquests of the Mexica and Incan empires would have been impossible. The same thing regarding the looting of gold. The crown only charged the royal fifth, el quinto real, and that was used for public expenses within the viceregal American territories, and the rest for the peninsula. Myth number 2. The Spanish did not discover anything. America had already been discovered by the original peoples and later by the Vikings. The Spanish did not arrive first in America. Yeah, that has been known already, but they were the ones who discovered it for the rest of the world. To discover something does not mean to arrive first. If a scientist finds the cure against cancer, but he does not tell anyone, then that scientist is not discovering anything for the world. The discoverer would be the one who made a said cure known to humanity. America remained hidden from the rest of the world. The Spanish discovered the fact that there existed other continents. This did not happen with the Vikings, because they only lived in small settlements in North America, without discovering that this was another continent. There is also no evidence that other groups of people arrived to the Americas. These are nothing more than legends. Myth number 3. The Spanish were simply lucky to stumble upon America. Columbus did not even know that he had discovered a new continent. He believed he had arrived in India. At that time, the most popular way to sail was bordering the coast without losing sight of it. The Spanish overcame that and sailed for a month on high seas into the unknown. They knew the road reached somewhere, but they did not know how long it would take. We have to keep in mind that the Spanish did not make the first trip around the world until some time later. The real diameter of the Earth was completely unknown. No one knew the true distance between Europe and the Far East. Despite the uncertainty, they went out to sea. There came a moment when it was not worth turning around because there were not enough provisions to return. Columbus at first believed to have reached a place within the Indies, not the modern state of India. It is impossible that Columbus would have believed to reach India without crossing any other territory, not to mention having traveled such an enormous distance. At the time, the Far East was known as the Indies, and within the Indies, it was speculated that there could be territories that had not yet been discovered. What they did not expect was a huge continent in between. This is where the names Indies derived from. Terms East Indies and West Indies were used to differentiate the separate territories, which is why their inhabitants were called Indians. When Columbus arrived at the mouth of the Orinoco River, he described it with the words otro mundo, another world. Even though these words have received different interpretations, whether this was another world within Asia or a world apart from Asia. With that said, Amerigo Vespucci is credited to be the first to conclude that it was a new continent in his travels between 1499 and 1501. However, Amerigo Vespucci never affirmed to having discovered the continent through his travels and is accused of having invented parts of his accounts. It is also said that it was not him who made stuff up, but his publishers who wished to increase sales. Bartolomé de las Casas accused them of being a faker and of wanting to appropriate the discovery of Columbus, but there is no proof of this. What is clear is that the cartographer Juan de la Cosa demonstrated the first world map where America appears and is completely separated from Asia, and he did it before Vespucci supposedly discovered the continent in the year 1500. Being that Columbus died in 1506, it could be hardly said that he died without knowing he had arrived in a new continent. For Columbus, it would have been quite difficult not to realize that the shape of the lands he was touring did not correspond to anything that resembled Asia. It is not outside of the realm of possibility either that another person could have been the first to realize that they had reached another continent. We only know this history thanks to those who actually wrote the history, not by people who wrote nothing at all. And to top it off, we don't even have a ton of data from that time. Myth number 4. October 12th is a fascist festival of Francoism that has its roots in the Spanish neocolonialists, and therefore we must change the name to the Day of Cultural Biodiversity and blah blah blah. Although it is true that the idea of celebrating this festival came from a Spaniard named Faustino Rodriguez San Pedro, the president of the Iberian American Union, the first country to establish it was Argentina in 1917, a year before Spain. The first time that it was celebrated was in La Casa de Argentina de Málaga in 1914, when it went by the name of Fiesta de la Raza Española and renamed to Día de la Raza, a name that didn't stick convincingly by many. It must also be stated that the word race in this context does not allude to any type of skin color or anything similar, but refers to the Hispanic people, like Viva la Raza when Mexicans commemorate their national pride. In the 20s, it would begin to be known as Hispanic Heritage Day, and it is still celebrated in many Latin American countries, sometimes under other names, such as the Day of Cultural Diversity, a term that is more typical of United States colonialism, which tries to impose the ideology of political correctness on other countries. Myth number 5. Christopher Columbus deserves all of the credit. From the black legend of the genocide, we move on to the white legend that surprisingly survives even more so in the United States, where Columbus Day focuses only on Christopher Columbus and is clearly an Italian holiday. Spain is absolutely unacknowledged. Columbus was Genoese, that is to say Italian, although Italy, as we know it today, did not exist back then. The reality is this: Christopher Columbus swore allegiance to the Catholic monarchs, and so did Amerigo Vespucci, which was the equivalent at the time to obtaining nationality. In addition, at that time, dual nationality did not exist. A person could only be loyal to one king. Columbus was but one piece of a larger picture. Even though he led expeditions, he would not have accomplished anything without the Catholic monarchs, who financed his expeditions and restricted them, like the time they arrested him in chains for torture and tyranny, stripped him of his governorship, and returned him back to Spain in the year 1500. He wouldn't have been able to carry out these expeditions without the people from Palos de la Frontera, and without the invaluable collaboration of the Pinzon brothers, who were great navigators and are credited for having settled conflicts that could have resulted into a storm. To this day, there exist some cartoons on YouTube with hundreds of thousands and even millions of views that unsuspectingly romanticize Columbus to the extreme. At the time, everyone believed that the earth was square and flat, except Columbus, who defended that it was round, and with his trip, he intended to prove it.
Mi nombre es Cristóbal Colón.
My name is Christopher Columbus, and I tell you that when I was born, many told me to believe that the earth was a world in the shape of a square board, resting on 4 elephants. When the horizon ended, an abyss began, and all those who fell into it were devoured by horrible monsters.